First Contact and Coffee. Grand Admiral Vex Terry of the Araxian Empire stood motionless on the bridge of the HFY Eternal Light, his crystalline exoskeleton refracting starlight in prismatic patterns. The massive warship, pride of the Araxian fleet, had just emerged from hyperspace at the edge of contested space, responding to reports of unauthorized vessels in their territory. What they found defied explanation. 3 small ships hung in the void, their hulls bearing unfamiliar markings and a strange symbol, a circle of stars on a blue field. The vessels were barely 1/10 the size of the Eternal Light, appearing to be constructed primarily from processed iron and titanium alloys. The Admiral's secondary neural cluster pulsed with confusion when his sensor chief reported they were detecting no energy shields, no quantum arrays, not even basic gravitic stabilizers. "Admiral," his communication officer called out, "the central vessel is hailing us. They're using radio waves." Vex Terry's crystal facets shifted in amusement. "Accept the transmission. Let's hear what these primitives have to say." The holoscreen materialized, revealing a human with auburn hair and laugh lines around her eyes. She wore a simple blue uniform with minimal ornamentation. "This is Captain Sarah Chen of the United Earth vessel Endeavor. Welcome to the Orion Arm. Would you care for some coffee?" The bridge fell silent. Of all possible first contact scenarios, the Araxians had never prepared for an offer of beverages. "Captain Chen." Vex Terry responded carefully. "I am Grand Admiral Vex Terry of the Araxian Empire. This sector falls under our protection. Your presence here is a violation of Imperial space." "Interesting claim," Chen replied, taking a sip from a steaming mug. "We've been mapping this sector for the past year and haven't detected any prior claims. Though we did notice your quantum beacon network needed some maintenance, we took the liberty of updating your encryption algorithms. They had a fascinating vulnerability when subjected to probability wave manipulation. Couldn't bear to see such elegant technology compromised." The bridge erupted in chaos. The quantum beacon network was supposed to be undetectable to lesser civilizations, its existence a closely guarded secret. More importantly, its encryption was based on 15-dimensional quantum mathematics. "Impossible," Vex Terry's science officer interjected. "The encryption requires computing power beyond what your vessels could possibly contain." "Oh, that," Chen smiled. "We solved it while trying to improve our coffee machines. You'd be amazed how many scientific breakthroughs we've had in pursuit of the perfect cup of coffee. Did you know we accidentally discovered stable micro-wormholes because someone wanted their coffee to stay at the perfect temperature? The physics department at MIT still hasn't lived that down." Vex Terry's sensor officer interrupted with increasing alarm. "Admiral, I'm detecting energy signatures that don't make sense. They appear to be using some kind of probability manipulation for power generation." "You can detect those." Chen looked genuinely pleased. "Most species miss them entirely. We call them quantum probability drives. Much cleaner than antimatter, though it took us ages to figure out how to stop them from occasionally turning nearby matter into exotic particles." That was an interesting week in the cafeteria. The Admiral's mind raced. These humans had seemingly stumbled into advanced quantum mechanics through beverage preparation. Their ships looked primitive because they had focused on practical innovation rather than aesthetic advancement. Every assumption about technological progression that the Araxians had relied upon was being casually dismissed by these humans who spoke of revolutionizing physics as if discussing the weather. "Captain Chen," Vex Terry said carefully, "I believe we should discuss this situation further. Would you be willing to dock with the Eternal Light for diplomatic talks?" "We'd be delighted, Admiral. Fair warning, though, we're bringing our coffee. Once you try it, you'll understand why it's responsible for half our scientific breakthroughs. I think your species will particularly enjoy our dark roast blend. Something about the molecular structure seems to resonate quite nicely with crystalline neural networks." As arrangements were made for docking, Vex Terry watched the human vessels with new eyes. Their simple appearance masked innovations that defied conventional understanding. The Araxian Empire had spent millennia advancing through carefully planned stages of technological development. These humans, it seemed, had simply looked at the universe and asked, why not? The most disturbing part, they appeared to be genuinely enjoying themselves. Vexteri had a feeling this encounter would change the galaxy forever. Whether that was good or bad remained to be seen. But one thing was certain. He was very curious about this coffee that had apparently helped humans revolutionize quantum physics. Perhaps, he mused while watching the Endeavor prepare for docking, the Empire's carefully structured approach to advancement had caused them to miss something fundamental about the nature of innovation itself. The humans had shown that great leaps forward could come from the most unexpected places, even from the simple desire to make a better cup of hot beverages. The logic of chaos. The diplomatic chamber aboard the Eternal Light hummed with barely contained chaos. Captain Chen sat across from Admiral Vexteri, surrounded by scattered datapads and empty coffee cups. Around them, human and Araxian engineers huddled in animated discussion groups, their conversations punctuated by occasional exclamations of disbelief or delight. "You're telling me," Chief Engineer Caxter said, his crystalline form flickering with excitement, "that you discovered quantum entanglement communication because of virtual reality latency." Dr. James Wong, the Endeavor's lead scientist, nodded while pouring another cup of coffee. Final raid night of the season. Nothing worse than lag during a boss fight. Some gaming engineers got together with quantum physicists at CERN and well, he shrugged. The rest is history. Vexteri watched his most brilliant minds struggle to process the humans' approach to scientific advancement. The Araxians had spent generations perfecting their understanding of subatomic particles before attempting quantum communication. The humans had apparently solved it because they wanted better response times in their entertainment systems. "Admiral," his tactical officer interrupted, voice tight with urgency. "3 Cathar warships have just entered the system. They're charging weapons." The Cathar, aggressive raiders who had been terrorizing the sector for months. Their technology rivaled the Araxians, and they weren't known for diplomacy. Chen's expression shifted from friendly to focused in an instant. "Ah, the ones who've been raiding your outer colonies." She tapped something on her datapad. "Mind if we handle this? We've been working on something interesting with our quantum probability drives." "Captain, the Cathar are not to be taken lightly. They're shields." "Trust me." "Admiral," Chen interrupted, already signaling her crew. "Sometimes the best solutions come from unexpected places. Besides," she added with a wink, "we've been looking for a chance to test our new defense systems. They're based on an interesting principle we discovered while trying to keep ice cream from melting." The Cathar vessels dropped out of hyperspace, their obsidian hulls bristling with weapon arrays. Their commander's transmission cut through space. Araxian weaklings, consorting with primitives now. Surrender or be destroyed. Primitives. Lieutenant Emma Martinez, Chen's tactical officer, looked up from her console where she appeared to be playing some kind of geometric puzzle game. "Did they seriously just call us primitives?" "Focus, Emma," Chen replied, though she was smiling. "How's that new defense algorithm coming along?" "Almost done, Captain. You know how Tetris is all about efficient space management and pattern recognition. Well, I figured we could apply the same principles to quantum shield harmonics. The math works out surprisingly well." The Cathar, clearly annoyed at being ignored, fired a warning shot that streaked past the Endeavor's bow. Instead of impacting against shields, the energy beam encountered something that made space itself hiccup. The beam twisted, turned, and reorganized itself into neat geometric patterns before dissipating harmlessly into space. "Did you just turn their energy weapon into a game of Tetris?" Vexteri asked incredulously. "More or less," Martins replied, finally looking up from her console. "The shield creates a probability matrix based on game theory principles. Incoming energy has to follow the rules of the game to get through. Most weapon systems don't play well with others." The Cathar commander was literally sputtering now. "Impossible." Our weapons are based on the most advanced quantum cascade principles in known space. Oh, those are lovely, Chen nodded appreciatively. Very elegant mathematical models. But you're thinking in straight lines. Sometimes you need to think more. Recreationally. Emma, show them what we learned from optimizing pizza delivery routes. Before the Kether could react, precise beams of energy shot from the human ships, threading through space in impossibly complex patterns. They bypassed the Kether shields completely, striking with surgical precision, and doing absolutely no damage. What did you do to our ships? The Kether commander demanded, his voice mixing rage with confusion. Rewrote their operating systems to run doom, Martins replied cheerfully. They can either retreat now or spend the next few hours trying to beat the game. Their choice. Really? As the Kether ships hung powerless in space, their crews presumably grappling with unfamiliar game mechanics, Vexteri turned to Chen. You turned their warships into gaming consoles. Well, we could have destroyed them, Chen said, sipping her coffee. But where's the fun in that? Besides, Doom is an excellent team-building exercise. They might learn something. The Kether vessels eventually retreated, their departure somewhat delayed by what appeared to be multiple attempts to reach the final boss level. As Vexteri watched them go, he realized that the galaxy's balance of power had just shifted dramatically, not through force of arms or technological superiority, but through humanity's bizarre ability to turn anything, even warfare, into an opportunity for entertainment. Dancing with lightning. The Kether returned 3 days later with a fleet of 30 warships. Their vessels emerged from hyperspace in perfect attack formation, weapons already charged. This time, they weren't taking chances with the humans' strange technology. Quite the party they brought, Captain Chen observed from the Endeavor's bridge, watching the massive fleet approach. Dr. Wang, how's that new propulsion system coming along? Just finished implementing the changes based on the interpretive dance algorithm, Wang replied, his fingers dancing across his console. You know how we discovered that quantum particles respond to rhythm and pattern. Turns out you can apply the same principles to ship movement. The Kether commander's transmission cut through their conversation. Your tricks won't save you this time, humans. Our weapons have been recalibrated. Your primitive vessels will be atomized. Interesting hypothesis, Chen replied, setting down her coffee mug. Care to test it? Emma initialized the dance protocol. The 3 human ships began to move in ways that should have been impossible. They weaved through space in complex patterns, their movements synchronized like performers in a cosmic ballet. The Kether's first volley of weapons fire passed harmlessly through the spaces where the human ships had been milliseconds before. Are they dancing? Vexteri asked from his observation position aboard the Eternal Light. Quantum waltz, Wang explained. Based on principles we discovered during a physics department holiday party. Turns out particle behavior in quantum fields closely resembles partner dancing. Who knew? The Kether fleet launched a full barrage, filling space with enough firepower to vaporize a small moon. The human ships responded by breaking into what appeared to be a synchronized swing dance routine, their movements precisely calculated to exist in the spaces between the enemy fire. Location prediction impossible. The Kether tactical officer screamed in frustration. Their movement patterns defy mathematical modeling. That's because you're trying to use logical progression, Martins replied over the open channel. Try thinking of it more like a jazz improvisation. Speaking of which, she pressed a sequence of commands on her console. Suddenly, the space around the Kether fleet lit up with swirling patterns of energy, forming what looked suspiciously like a dance floor grid. Their ships found themselves caught in a quantum probability field that forced them to move in time with an unheard rhythm. What is happening? The Kether commander demanded as his fleet began to move in synchronized patterns against their will. We call it the electric slide protocol, Chen explained cheerfully. A quantum field manipulation technique based on classic Earth dance moves. Right now, your ships are caught in a probability matrix that responds to rhythm and pattern. The only way to break free is to complete the dance sequence. The galaxy was treated to the absurd spectacle of 30 Cathar warships performing a perfectly synchronized dance routine through space, their fearsome weapons arrays pulsing in time with quantum fluctuations. This is impossible. The Cathar commander rage. You cannot simply turn the fundamental forces of the universe into a dance party. Why not? Wang asked genuinely. The universe is all about patterns and rhythm. We just figured out how to make it groove. Did you know we discovered this principle while studying the relationship between music and plant growth? One of our agricultural scientists was a former DJ. The dance routine continued for several minutes, the Cathar fleet unwillingly performing increasingly complex maneuvers. Finally, Chen signaled Martinez, "I think they've learned enough about rhythm for one day. Let's wrap this up." The human ships moved in perfect synchronization, executing a final elaborate sequence that generated a cascading wave of quantum probability shifts. The Cathar fleet found their weapons systems transformed into music synthesizers, their engine cores now operating on principles derived from disco ball physics. "You have two choices," Chen informed the thoroughly humiliated Cathar commander. "Retreat now, or we'll initiate the YMCA protocol. Your call." The Cathar fleet departed at maximum speed, their ships still trailing quantum dance particles. As they vanished into hyperspace, Vexteri turned to Chen with his crystalline features arranged in what humans would recognize as bewilderment. "Captain, I must ask, is everything humans do somehow connected to entertainment or food?" "Not everything," Chen replied thoughtfully. "Sometimes we make breakthrough discoveries while trying to improve our pets' toys. Speaking of which, wait until you see what we learned about teleportation from studying cat behavior. Impossible mathematics." The Cathar returned one final time, not with 30 ships, but with 300. Their massive fleet emerged from hyperspace in an attack sphere, completely surrounding the human vessels and the eternal light. "Your dance tricks won't save you now," the Cathar Grand Marshal announced. "We've brought enough firepower to destroy a solar system." Captain Chen studied the tactical display while absently stirring her coffee. "Dr. Wang, remember that thing we discovered while trying to solve MMO server lag? The quantum server architecture based on massively parallel cloud computing. Already on it." Wang's fingers flew across his console. "Martinez, ready for that thing we figured out from studying bird murmuration patterns. Quantum swarm mechanics initialized," Martinez confirmed. "Still can't believe we discovered this while watching starlings outside the cafeteria." The Cathar opened fire simultaneously, 300 ships unleashing enough energy to shatter a planet. Instead of dodging, the 3 human ships simply divided. Each vessel split into hundreds of quantum probability shadows, exact duplicates existing in slightly different dimensional phases. "Impossible," the Cathar Grand Marshal sputtered. "You cannot simply create matter from nothing." "Oh, these aren't matter," Wang explained cheerfully. "They're quantum probability instances. Like running multiple server instances to handle player overflow, but with spaceships. Fascinating implications for the many worlds interpretation of quantum mechanics, actually. We're presenting a paper on it next month." The human ship instances began moving in perfect synchronization, forming complex geometric patterns that somehow existed in more dimensions than space should allow. Each movement generated cascading waves of quantum probability that transformed the Cathar weapons fire into increasingly bizarre phenomena. One barrage turned into a shower of virtual particles that spelled out ERR 404. Weapon not found in 12-dimensional space. Another became a quantum hologram of cats playing with yarn, while a third simply forgot to exist, leaving behind a brief note apologizing for the inconvenience. "This defies all known laws of physics," the Cathar science officer protested. "Known laws?" Chen raised an eyebrow. "Have you tried asking the laws of physics nicely if they'd mind being a bit more flexible? You'd be amazed what you can accomplish with proper manners and a good cup of coffee." The human ship's quantum instances began moving faster, their patterns growing more complex until they formed what appeared to be a massive neural network in space itself. Each node pulsed with calculations that made advanced AI systems look like pocket calculators. By the way, Martins added, while you've been focused on our ships, our quantum probability network has been running an interesting simulation. Would you like to know the results? The Cathar fleet suddenly found their tactical displays showing detailed simulations of every possible outcome of the battle. In exactly 0 of them did the Cathar achieve victory. Several scenarios involved their fleet being transformed into an elaborate zero-gravity water park, while others showed them becoming part of a quantum computing cluster dedicated to optimizing coffee brewing temperatures. The choice is yours, Chen offered. You can retreat now, or we can continue this experiment. Our research team is particularly interested in testing some theories about quantum entangled dance competitions. The Cathar fleet vanished into hyperspace so quickly they nearly broke several laws of physics, laws that the humans had already proven to be more like polite suggestions anyway. As the quantum probability instances merged back into 3 normal-looking ships, Vexteri turned to Chen. You could have done this at any time, couldn't you? All the games, the dancing, the entertainment. Of course, Chen smiled. But where's the fun in just winning? This way, maybe they learned something. Speaking of learning, would you like to hear about how we discovered faster-than-light communication by studying cat behavior? It's quite an interesting story, actually. It all started when someone noticed their cat seemingly being in 2 places at once. Victory in absurdity. One standard month after the Cathar's final retreat, representatives from 12 major galactic civilizations gathered aboard the Eternal Light. They had come to discuss humanity's unprecedented approach to physics, warfare, and reality itself. Let me understand this correctly, the Zixtal ambassador said, their photonic form flickering with confusion. Your species discovered quantum tunneling while trying to make toast. The toast kept disappearing, Dr. Wong explained, distributing cups of coffee to the assembled delegates. Turns out it was briefly tunneling through 11-dimensional space, made for some interesting breakfast conversations. The gathered ambassadors watched in fascination as their drinks somehow maintained the perfect temperature despite the varying environmental requirements of their different species. Several scientific officers were quietly having existential crises in the corner. But why? Asked the Mirith representative, their feathers ruffling in agitation. Why approach the universe's fundamental laws through such chaotic means? Captain Chen smiled. Because the universe itself is chaos. We just learn to dance with it instead of trying to impose order. Speaking of which, she nodded to Martinez. The tactical officer pressed a single button on her console. Suddenly, every piece of technology in the room, from the simplest communicator to the most advanced quantum computer, began playing a synchronized melody. The tune was somehow perfectly harmonious despite crossing 17 different dimensional frequencies. That's impossible, the Araxian Science Council representative whispered. You're manipulating quantum fields across multiple dimensional barriers using music. Why not? Wong shrugged. The universe has rhythm. Particles dance. Space itself hums. We just learn to join the symphony instead of trying to conduct it. But your ships, protested another delegate. They appear so primitive. Ah, about that. Chen grinned. Emma, show them what our ships really look like. The seemingly simple human vessels shimmed for a moment. Their basic metal hulls dissolved into fractal patterns that existed in more dimensions than most species could perceive. Every surface was alive with quantum probability fields, each atom simultaneously existing in multiple states while maintaining perfect harmony with its neighbors. We found it easier to keep things looking simple, Martinez explained. Turns out when you build ships that exist in 15 dimensions simultaneously, other species tend to get nervous. Besides, the basic appearance helped us perfect our quantum camouflage technology. Would you believe we discovered that while studying chameleon skin patterns, The delegates stared in stunned silence as they realized the full implications. Humanity hadn't just mastered advanced technology. They'd fundamentally changed how it could be approached. Their ships weren't just vessels. They were physical manifestations of the principle that the universe could be playful. "The real question," Chen said, raising her coffee cup, "isn't how we did it. The question is, would you like to learn? We're starting an interstellar scientific exchange program. First lesson involves understanding why cats seem to ignore quantum locality constraints. They're surprisingly good teachers once you get past the attitude." As the delegates began enthusiastically discussing the possibility of learning humanity's unique approach to science, Vex Terry turned to Chen. "You've changed everything, you know. The galaxy will never be the same." "Change is good," Chen replied. "Besides, wait until they discover what we learned about faster-than-light travel by studying the aerodynamics of pizza dough tossing. That's going to be a fun lecture." And so began a new era in galactic civilization, where the boundaries between science and play blurred, where the most profound discoveries could come from the most mundane observations, and where a good cup of coffee could lead to revolutionizing the fundamental laws of physics. The universe, it seemed, had a sense of humor after all. Humanity had simply been the first to get the joke.